home alone and felt an unsettling presence around you? A shiver runs down your spine as the silence echoes, the solitude wrapping around like a chilling blanket. The mind begins to play tricks, painting eerie figures in the shadows. In the next few moments, we're about to delve into 3 true stories of such eerie experiences. Each tale, more chilling than the last, will explore the unsettling reality of being home alone. So brace yourself, let the suspense build, and prepare yourself for the first unsettling tale. Imagine the chilling rush of discovering you're not alone in your own home, that there's an unseen entity dwelling with you. This is the story of a man named John. John led a life that was highly ordinary, nothing out of the ordinary to report. He worked a 9-5 as an insurance broker, lived in a comfortable suburban house in a community where everyone knew everyone else, and was an amateur birdwatcher in his spare time. His life was marked by routines, and his biggest concern was usually keeping up with his book club's reading list. However, this mundane, predictable life was not to last. Subtle changes started creeping in. He'd arrive home after a long day to find his food supplies depleted, his personal items in disarray, and mysterious sounds that seemed to bounce off the walls when he was alone. At first, John merely attributed these incidents to his own forgetfulness or overworking. But as the days turned into weeks, these occurrences became too frequent, too peculiar to be dismissed as mere coincidences. The disembodied sounds, the vanishing food, the rearranged items all started to gnaw at his nerves. His once welcoming home now seemed to hold a creepy, unsettling presence. Then came a day that would change everything. John returned home from work to find the attic door, which had been untouched for years, slightly open. A frisson of fear sliding his spine, he ascended the attic stairs, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a wildly pounding heart. The attic itself was dusty and filled with forgotten relics of yesteryears, and there, amongst the dust and cobwebs, was a makeshift living space. A sleeping bag, food wrappers, and personal items were scattered around. The most horrifying aspect was a collection of his own photos, all of him, taken from a distance, when he believed himself to be alone. The realization hit him like an iceberg. He had been living with an invisible roommate, an entity that observed his every move, living with him in his own home. This realization shook John to his core. He could never regain his peace of mind. He moved out of his home, but the feeling of being constantly watched never left him. He'd lay awake at night, haunted by the memory of those voyeuristic photos and the entity lurking in the shadows. The terror of discovering that he had been observed all along by the unseen roommate lingered, leaving a lasting impact on his life. It's a spine-chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things are those that lurk unseen. Imagine this: a woman named Lisa, a vibrant 26-year-old with a vivacious spirit and a daring sense of adventure. She had just landed a new job at a bustling city law firm, her professional life was just taking off, and she had recently moved into a charming house in the heart of the suburbs. It was a dream come true. But little did she know this newfound joy would be short-lived. It all began with the midnight phone calls, exactly at the stroke of 12. A daunting silence on the other end. The first few times, she dismissed it as a prank. But as the night calls persisted, she grew uneasy. It was on a particularly cold night while she was preparing for bed that Lisa realized the horrifying truth. On answering the midnight call, she heard a faint, almost inaudible whisper of a sound. It was the same sound she had grown accustomed to, the faint creaking of her attic floorboards. Her heart pounded like a war drum as the realization dawned on her. Terrifyingly, the calls were originating from inside her own home. This was no innocent prank, there was an intruder. The police arrived in what seemed like an eternity later, their flashing lights piercing the deadly silence. They made a thorough search of her home, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like swords. And in the attic, they made a chilling discovery: a makeshift bed tucked into a corner, surrounded by food wrappers, and most frighteningly, a mobile phone, still warm from recent use. The intruder was gone, presumably scared off by the approaching sirens, leaving behind irrefutable evidence of their disturbing presence. The terror of the midnight calls and the realization that she was not alone, but under the gaze of an intruder, shattered Lisa's sense of security. Every creak, every shadow, was a constant reminder of the hiding menace. She was no longer comfortable in her own home, her safe haven was now a haunted house. She moved out shortly after, leaving behind the beloved house and the terrifying memory of the intruder. But the ghost of the midnight caller still haunted her, a chilling reminder that we are not always as safe as we believe. This tale serves as a horrifying beacon of how quickly the familiar can morph into the terrifyingly unfamiliar. Sometimes the things we fear are closer than we think. Shadows are just the absence of light, or are they? Let's delve into the chilling chronicle of a seemingly average teenager named Jake. Jake was your typical 17-year-old, juggling between school, soccer practice, and a part-time job at the local diner. His life was a rhythmic pattern of familiarity, a picture of normalcy that would soon be shattered. One fateful evening, his parents were away. A night that was supposed to be filled with video games and pizza took a turn for the eerie. It was a night where the shadows in his home would evolve from harmless dark corners to living, breathing entities. As the sun set that day, casting long, unsettling shadows that stretched out like long-fingered hands, reaching out from the darkness, Jake noticed something uncanny. The shadows appeared to dance, not in tune with the setting sun, but to their own sinister symphony. He brushed it off initially, a figment of his overworked imagination, he thought. As the night grew darker, the dance of the shadows escalated from a waltz to a macabre ballet of darkness. The once harmless and idle shadows twisted and turned, morphed and moved, defying any natural laws of light and darkness. It felt as though they pulsated with a life of their own, entities that lurked with purpose and intent in the corners of his home. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. His palms turned slick with cold sweat, but he convinced himself it was all in his head. It was merely an interplay of light and darkness, wasn't it? However, the shadows seemed to whisper a different, darker narrative. One evening, as he was huddled in his room, a shadow crept across the wall. Not a mere fleeting moment of darkness, but a clear, distinct shape that moved with an intent that sent chills down his spine. It was at this moment Jake realized the shadows were not just an absence of light. They were something far more malevolent, entities that seemed to feed off his mounting fear. His home, once a sanctuary of comfort and security, had transformed into a playground for these nefarious shadows. Sleep became a distant memory as he lay awake, eyes wide open, watching the shadows perform their sinister dance. When he attempted to seek help, to explain what he was witnessing, he was met with skepticism and disbelief. Who would believe that shadows, mere absences of light, could act of their own accord? It sounded ludicrous, an overwrought horror story sprung to life. But Jake knew what he had seen, what he had felt. There was tangible, the shadows were real. They were not mere illusions, but embodiments of something far more horrifying. Days turned into weeks, and the shadows grew bolder, their movements more audacious, their presence a constant, palpable terror. Jake felt trapped in his own home, a prisoner to his deepest fears that had taken a physical form of ever-dancing shadows. However, he learned to coexist with them, accepting their sinister presence. He found resilience in his fear, bravery in his terror. Jake was not merely a victim of the sinister shadows. He was a survivor, a warrior facing an unseen enemy. The sinister shadows were not mere illusions, they were manifestations of his deepest fears. These tales are a chilling reminder that sometimes our worst fears can be closer than we think. In our journey through the dark, we've encountered the unseen roommate, the midnight caller, and the sinister shadows. Each story, a testament to the unnerving reality that when we believe we are safe in our solitude, we might just be sharing our space with the unseen, the unknown, and the uninvited. The unseen roommate, who made us question the very walls we call home. The phantom presence that turned a sanctuary into a stage of unease. The midnight caller, a spectral voice in the dark, reminding us that even in the dead of night, we are not always the only ones awake. A voice that echoed through the silent halls, turning tranquility into a haunting melody of dread. The sinister shadows, an eerie dance of darkness that played tricks on the mind and blurred the lines between reality and nightmare. A performance that made us question whether the things we see out of the corner of our eyes are mere figments of our imagination, or something far more sinister. These tales serve as a stark reminder of the fear that lurks in the corners of our minds when we're home alone, the unsettling feeling that maybe, just maybe, we're not alone after all. So share your own experiences, your own tales of the uncanny, feed into this collective fear, this shared unease. Remember, the next time you're home alone, you might not be as alone as you think.